Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Hope you're all enjoying the weekend. Today we're testing out a Protobelt first build while using Hex Flash. Recently, I've seen a lot of comments from Riot's lead dev team about how champions with dashes seem to have a major advantage over those who don't. So, let's put this theory to the test and see if it holds up. The truth about League of Legends is that sometimes it's not about what you do, but when you do it. For instance, here we were just chilling, me and Renekton, on the top side, when suddenly Wukong decides to stroll into the bush, thinking his jungle's safe. Sometimes you queue up with random people, and right from the start, you're on the same wavelength, like you both just get that bro vibe in how you play together. This season, the recommended path isn't the usual 3 camps then top gank, but I figured with the vibe I'm getting from this top side, why not go for it? My first thought was how to use Hex Flash to gain that extra burst of distance from the bush for a sneaky gank. Now, we know that on average, humans need about 1/10 of a second to react, that split-second delay while their brain processes the movement. So, by skipping that reaction time, like Baki Hanma did, our gank stands a much better chance of succeeding, giving us an advantage in both surprise and distance. After that successful gank, the enemy Wukong didn't contest our bot side, which is a huge advantage. We're now on solid footing early on, securing a bigger farm lead, which is great for our morale. Another thing are the mini-games. They aren't limited to your jungle pathing. Here I held off on using Smite until Scuttle hit below 600 HP, baiting them into a fight. That plan worked out even better than expected. Sometimes, the game just naturally falls in your favor. You don't have to force it, just be in the right place at the right time. At this point, it's key not to push your luck just because you're feeling stronger. It's easy to assume the enemy might not know their champion's limits, but that can backfire. Take Garen's shield, for example. It's a powerful ability that can negate significant damage and reduce crowd control, giving him an unexpected edge for an outplay in a split second. So I figured, alright, if it didn't work with this setup, maybe it'll work with 3 of us. But surprisingly, even with 3 players, it backfired. We ended up losing 2 teammates and it was almost laughable. The dive on Garen went to shit so fast. Even with me tanking the tower and 2 allies, we lost 2 members for nothing. All of this mess happened simply due to one well-timed defensive shield. A lot went down in the early game, and we still hadn't seen Wukong. Then, finally, after over 10 minutes of gameplay, we meet him. Now, I'm not sure if that early invade tilted him or if he's just not familiar with the jungle, but this encounter really shows he's either a first-timer or completely tilted. When the enemy jungler shows no presence, it's like an open invitation to invade and take their farm. Some players just reveal a lack of presence that often points to either poor mastery of their champion or poor decision-making. In other words, they're a weak link, and pressuring them can cause the entire enemy team to crumble. It becomes much harder for them to carry, unless they have a hyper-carry like Sylas on their team. Sylas is the ultimate carry by himself, so I respect Sylas players whether they're with or against me. Now, let's dive into the advantage of building Protobelt and Cosmic Drive on Volibear, and why the order actually matters. Based on this game, I'm certain that starting with Cosmic Drive into Protobelt is more effective than the other way around. With Cosmic first, you get a great boost of ability power and movement speed that pairs perfectly with your passive's attack speed increase. Plus, while the Protobelt dash is nice for catching elusive targets, it's not versatile enough early on. You can't dash over walls and it's only useful in the mid to late game. When you finish both items though, you start to feel the difference in the gameplay. The attack speed from your passive becomes significant for wave clearing and pacing auto attacks, and the extra mobility is a big deal for running down targets. You don't get much defense except for extra HP, but this setup gives you solid carry potential. Is this build good? Definitely. Should we thank Sir the Boss for this approach with it? The main drawback is that rushing Protobelt sacrifices the early movement speed and the extra ability haste that Cosmic Drive provides, which are valuable for Volibear and making early ganks successful. Using the Rift Herald in the mid lane to secure 2 towers can be a game-changing move, especially if it leads to an open inhibitor. This strategy not only gives you significant map control, but also creates pressure that forces the enemy team to respond. Imagine this. With the mid lane pushed and the inhibitor in sight, you have a couple of options. You can choose to pressure objectives like the Dragon or Baron, or you can sneak the inhib with a teleport. If the enemy team sends a couple of champions to defend, you and your jungler or mid laner have a lot of damage. Either soloing the objective or taking the inhib is both valid options. After that chaotic mid-engagement to take down the inhibitor, I felt that going for the Drake would be a safer option. Honestly, I wasn't sure why we couldn't just end the game against their composition. It felt like we had the advantage, but closing it out proved to be more difficult than anticipated. At this point, I couldn't tell if it was a miscommunication or if the enemy team was just trying to force something. Then a fight broke out near the Drake, and the decision was mine. I decided to finish taking the Drake and then join my teammates. Then something funny happened. When dealing with invisible targets or champions with clone abilities, you can make sure you're always targeting the real player by using your bite. It's like marking them. You can almost smell the fear. LeBlanc tried to trick me by faking her clone, but it was so obvious that the clone doesn't have the mark. The fact that she didn't notice was a bit amusing. While I think Wukong was probably getting flamed for his poor performance, which I don't mind, it's clear that not having a strong jungler, or even just an average one, can fundamentally impact your team's morale and gameplay. It's frustrating, but it's a reality we have to deal with in League of Legends. In situations like this, we resorted to a classic strategy, setting a trap at the entrance of their jungle. It's a simple tactic that tends to work well, and honestly, it rarely fails. By positioning ourselves there, we could apply pressure and force them into an uncomfortable position. The enemy team had two choices. Either they could forfeit and accept their defeat, or try to stall us out in hopes of making a comeback. It was a tense standoff, but we knew that as long as we maintained control of the jungle, we'd be in a good spot to finish the game. At this point, we really wanted to close out the game, but it felt like we were struggling a bit to finish things off. Garen had decent wave clear, and our team didn't exactly know how to deal with him. We primarily relied on our engage and skirmish potential. This made it tough to push for the final towers and finish off the inhibitor, especially since the enemy team was stuck in this weird back and forth. They didn't want to give up, but also didn't seem keen on letting the game end. Now that we've completed our 2 core items, the main idea is to focus on acquiring defensive stats. This concept was initially suggested by the boss FFS, and I also agree with it. You can also go for something a little bit spicy by adding 1 offensive item, Riftmaker. This will cause your damage to skyrocket, and the healing will be excellent on Volibear. If you choose to go for defensive stats, picking up Winter's Approach might feel a little late unless you manage to get the tier early. If you don't, then Frozen Heart into Spirit Visage can be a solid combo, finishing off the build with Hullbreaker. This will provide you with a very strong final form for Volibear. You can deal damage, split push, tank damage, and more importantly, enjoy a lot of movement speed. The build used by boss FFS has been adjusted, particularly in terms of its Zeke's convergence and locket. However, I believe he acquired those items simply because he had the exact amount of gold when he backed in high ELO. That's one of the best decisions you can make, because you can't afford to waste gold, as every item has been nerfed, except for their passives. So if you find a good passive, like with Abyssal Mask, and you have the gold, go for it. It will be much more beneficial than buying smaller components that won't add much value, except for Warden's Mail and Spectre's Cowl, which can still be useful as they are. Now, the most important thing about this game is that even though this build is powerful, Garen is even more broken than ours. Sure, you can play Garen in the jungle since he deals extra damage to monsters, but you lack any real crowd control, which poses a significant risk in this pick in the jungle. Well, in this situation, I just want to take the soul and finish the game, but we have the monkey split pushing and not wanting to group with the team. To be honest, their team isn't that bad. They're just struggling with communication. Plus, dealing with LeBlanc around is really tough because, in my opinion, she doesn't have any true counterplay except for Poppy, or by someone with a 100% lockdown, like Maokai or Leona. So yeah, the extra HP is definitely helpful. It allows you to survive a lot of damage, especially from hard-hitting champions. When it comes to offensive stats, HP is a huge deal for Volibear. The nerf that took 2 seconds off your E was rough, but if they did add some extra HP scaling, that wouldn't be too bad. Most shields in the game scale with HP, but for some reason, Volibear and a few others don't benefit from that mechanic. It's frustrating because balanced team don't treat everyone equally. But with that said, my dear viewers, this is the final play of the game. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and don't forget to drop a like. Until the next video, take care everyone, and peace.